A well-defined object supports a clearly defined role in our system. Design is an iterative and incremental process of envisioning objects and their responsibilities, and then inventing flexible collaborations between objects to carry those out. So when we're designing an object and object interactions through contracts, like we talked about previously, we need to constantly be asking ourselves, what role does this object play in the contract? Who is depending on this object to do its part? What are they asking for? What are they expecting in return? So when it comes to collaboration, like we said, there are at least two parties involved. Two objects collaborate because one or both of the objects needs something out of that relationship. I need help. And I know that you provide a service. Can you help me out? Can we work together? So then they work in concert to fulfill larger responsibilities inside of the system, right? So when we're designing collaborations, we have to consider objects as partners, working together and not as isolated individuals. And so it's helpful to look at common kinds or types of roles called stereotypes to better understand what an object is doing in a collaboration relationship. In other words, if we look at all the possible things that objects can do, we can boil it down to just basically half a dozen typical activities or responsibilities in any system. We oversimplify those responsibilities in order to help us focus on the responsibilities at a higher level, so a higher level of abstraction. So if we take a look at this book again, I'm going to push you towards this book, talks about object role stereotypes, and that's really what I want to look at here. I put the pertinent passages on screen. So we're going to take a look at the 6 that are defined in this book, starting off with information holder. So an information holder is a type of object that knows and provides information to others. Then there's a structurer. It maintains relationships between objects and information about those relationships. There's a service provider. It performs work and in general offers computing services. There's a coordinator that reacts to events by delegating tasks to others. There's the controller that makes decisions and closely directs others' actions. And then there's an interfacer, one that transforms information and requests between distinct parts of our system. Now again, there may be more than just these. This is a nice way to get started with the list, but hopefully at a high level you can see the utility of each of those kinds of stereotypes that can be used as roles or responsibilities inside of our system for a particular object. And it's important to keep in mind that a single object could fit into one or more of these stereotypes. Now, if it tries to do too much, if it tries to in these stereotypes be a coordinator, controller, interfacer, and an information holder, then maybe it's time to rethink that particular object. It kind of is analogous to that fancy machine that I talked about several videos ago. Perhaps that particular machine in our manufacturing environment is trying to do too much. And perhaps each object or each machine should focus on doing one job and doing it really well. On the other hand, if the object is simply an information holder and that's all that it is, it might be criticized as being anemic. In other words, it might be criticized for not doing enough in the system. You're not really holding your own value here. Why are you even here? So we might describe objects in terms of how many stereotypes that they actually implement. For example, we might say that an object is smart when it both encapsulates data and that data is affects the decisions that that particular object makes and how it fulfills its responsibility. We might say that a particular object is a pesky object because it has to ask its collaborators for every little detail to perform its responsibilities. Can't you just go figure it out on your own, right? So there's this balance that you have to strike. And I'm going to talk about the balance of too much or not enough later in this and subsequent courses. This is all part of the process of angst that you go through whenever you're designing objects. It's an ongoing discovery process. It's a trial and error process whenever you're designing objects and their collaborations. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go back to what I said as we started this particular video. We have one goal in object design and collaboration design, and that is to create well-defined objects that support a clearly defined role. And we iterate through the incremental process of envisioning objects and their responsibilities and inventing flexible collaborations. If that takes one or all six of these stereotypes, well, then so be it. And we're not done. We've talked about contracts and the role each party plays in the contract. We need to talk about maybe some fine print if we're going to continue that analogy with a contract. How do we guarantee that each party actually does what they promised they would do? We'll talk about that next. Thanks.